When can the police shoot a suspect in the head? The lawfulness of a firearms officer's use of force in shooting a suspect in the head, even a split-second decision like this one, centers on four fundamental principles. 1. Legitimacy. 2. Necessity. 3. Proportionality. And 4. All underpinned by the fourth principle, justification. The first principle to determine whether the firearms officer's use of force in shooting a suspect in the head was lawful is legitimacy. This means the firearms officer can only use force by shooting a suspect in the head for a lawful police objective, as defined by law. For example, to make an arrest or help make an arrest of someone who is committing a crime or suspected of committing a crime, and to prevent crime as per Section 3 of the Criminal Law Act 1967, or in self-defense or defense of another person, or to protect property as per common law, and to use reasonable force in the execution of a police power as per Section 117 of PACE. An unlawful police objective would be to shoot the suspect in the head based on their race. The second principle to determine whether the firearms officer's use of force in shooting a suspect in the head was lawful is necessity. This means the firearms officer can only use force if they believed it was genuinely needed in the circumstances. That police belief must be an honest and reasonable one to hold, even if it's ultimately mistaken. And that police belief can be based on what the suspect said or did, or based on intel that they held about the suspect. Furthermore, the principle of necessity means the firearms officer's use of force in shooting the suspect in the head must be as a last resort, not the first, and therefore the firearms officer must consider alternatives before they use force. For example, where it is reasonable and practicable in the circumstances for the police to issue a warning and order the suspect to do or not to do an action, they must do so before shooting the suspect in the head. The third principle to determine whether the firearms officer's use of force in shooting a suspect in the head was lawful is proportionality. This means the firearms officer's use of force must only be the minimum required to achieve the lawful police objective and not be excessive and disproportionate. The threat level, as well as the targeted area on the suspect's body and head, are both important to consider whether the firearms officer's actions were reasonable and proportionate. Generally, the greater the danger the suspect poses, the more force can be used to achieve a lawful police objective. And finally, the lawfulness of the firearms officer's use of force is determined and underpinned by the fourth principle, justification. This means the firearms officer must be able to A. Justify the police objective to use force in shooting the suspect in the head as defined by law in the circumstances. B. Justify it was necessary to use force by shooting the suspect in the head in the circumstances. And C. Justify the use of force in shooting the suspect in the head rather than anywhere else was proportionate and not excessive response in the circumstances. And each shot needs to be justified, not just the first one. If all four principles are adhered to in the circumstances, the actions of the firearms officer will be considered lawful. If not, the firearms officer is likely to face criminal, civil, and disciplinary actions, or all three. Feel free to comment, follow, like, and share.